Hey guys, it's Neil here. I want to talk to you today about the importance of acclimatizing your plants before you plant them out into the garden. And I'll also show you how you can extend the growing season a little bit by using cold frames. So I've transplanted some tomatoes that I grew inside into my raised bed here, and I want to show you the leaves of one of those tomato plants. If I look at the leaves on the tip here, it's still a nice solid green, but if I move a couple leaves down, you're going to see this blotchy spotting on the leaves, that white spotting, and what that is sunburn. If the tomatoes aren't acclimatized properly, because they've been grown inside, if you just put them directly out into the direct sunlight, they're just like humans and they're going to get a little bit sunburned. And that's why it's important to acclimatize your plants prior to planting them into your garden. Something that gardeners call hardening off. So how do you acclimatize or harden off your plants? Well, it's not an exact science. Here I've got some plants, some of which I grew inside. The tomatoes I grew inside under grow lights, as well as the alyssum and some of the marigolds. And then the rest I got in an awesome little greenhouse out by Mornville called Deb's Greenhouses. And so all of these plants haven't been accustomed to being outside. They've been either grown in a greenhouse or they've been grown inside under grow lights. And so when you start introducing them outside, you need to do it little bit by little bit. And so when I first bring them home, I'll maybe put them out in the shade for a couple hours. And then the next day I might increase that by maybe an hour or two, just so they get used to being outside and the breeze and a little bit of wind, a little bit cooler temperatures. And then slowly you want to start adding sunlight. So I might add with little part shade, part sun for a couple hours one day, and then the next day maybe 3 or 4 hours of kind of mottled sunlight with a little bit of shade. And you just want to slowly ramp up the amount of sunlight that the plants get so that they get acclimatized to being out in the sun. So I promised you I'd show you the cold frame as well. I can have up to 3 cold frames here on my raised bed, but I only have the lid on one of them right now, and that's so I could put my tomatoes and my peppers in the garden. Now normally I would never ever plant tomatoes and peppers out in the garden this early. It's May 5th, and that's sort of the average last frost date, and so that's pretty risky. Normally I'd wait till 3rd week of May or so when things are a little bit warmer and the tomatoes are going to do a little bit better, but because I have these cold frames, it allows me to extend the growing season a little bit. And so all it is just a simple frame with this plastic sheeting on top. It's a specialized polycarbonate that is UV protected on one side so that the plastic doesn't break down in the sunlight. And normally my lid would just sit on top of my cold frame, but I've kind of got it up on stilts here a little bit just because my soil was a little bit higher, my plants were a little bit too tall, and I didn't want it crushing my plants. So I've just sort of extended it all the way around. And so on nice warm days, on 20-degree days, I can take the lid off or open it up if it's hinged on the back. And then when it gets cooler at night, I can close it as the sun goes down, and it keeps some of the heat in there. So I don't have to worry when it gets down to 0 or +1 or +2. I don't have to worry about frost because I know that the plants are going to be protected inside these cold frames. So I'll probably do another video on cold frames a little bit later on because they can allow you to do some pretty cool things. I've had seasons where I've gotten 2 crops of carrots in the same year. I've grown spinach in the middle of January in cold frames with no heating whatsoever. It's just sort of like having a little mini greenhouse, and they're super easy to build and pretty inexpensive. And don't worry if you don't have cold frames. That just means you have to wait a little bit longer before planting your tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and that type of thing outside into your gardens.